I was scouring the internet for some sort of paying gig. I didn't really care what. Then I came across a post on Craigslist. I had just refreshed the page and there it was. Someone was looking for a person to come by and feed their pets. I assumed that they were going out of town or something, so I contacted them and left my number through email. I got a response immediately in the form of a phone call. The caller was a man who explained to me that he was moving out of town and his parents had cats that they wanted fed daily. I gave the man my name so he could run a courtesy background check, and in about 20 minutes I was hired. I went there the next morning to get all the instructions and whatnot and meet with the man I had spoken to on the phone. His name was Ben. Ben explained to me that he would no longer be able to care for his parents' cats and that his parents needed to focus on themselves, so I was being brought to take care of that. The money would be left in the kitchen table every week, $200 a week. In addition to that, money for more cat food would be left to me as well. Then he told me the first thing that I thought was strange. It was to come by at exactly 10 a.m. every day and be gone by 10 a.m. And I was not to ever, under any circumstances, interact with his parents. He told me that they would be in their home and they will be in their chairs in the living room watching television and that I was not to disturb them ever. He asked if that would be a problem, to which I assured him it wouldn't. He then showed me the area in which the cats ate and where the food was kept. While not rude in the least, he was very adamant about not exploring further in the house, which I promised him wouldn't be a problem. He ushered me outside and showed me where the spare key was in case the door was ever locked, but then he told me that was very unlikely to happen. And with that, he expressed his hope that I could be trusted one last time, shook my hand and told me to be there at 10 a.m. every day starting tomorrow. If I was ever unable to make it, call and leave a message on their home phone, to which he gave me the number. I shook my head and was on my way. The next day came and I went inside at exactly 10 a.m. I walked into the house and immediately to my right were Ben's parents, sitting in recliners facing away from me, watching some kind of game show. I announced my presence, to which they ignored, and made my way into the kitchen. I fed the cats and left. This exact scenario played out countless of times for the next months. 10 a.m., unreturned hellos, feed the cats and leave. On Fridays, I would pick up a small sack of $20 bills in the kitchen table. It was the easiest job I ever had. Then came the inevitable. One day I was running late. I got up to the house at 10:08. I entered and apologized to Ben's parents for being late, to which once again, no response. They just kept sitting in their chairs watching their game show. I went to the kitchen and fed the cats. I looked to my phone, which read 10:11. I walked down the hall towards the front door. When I reached the living room, I jumped and gasped out of shock. Ben's parents were now standing in the dark behind their chairs, completely still staring at me. I apologized for running late and got out of there. Though unnerved, I went back the next day on time and everything was fine. A few more months went by and nothing strange, and then came the last day I was there. I got there about 10:03, but wasn't worried because I knew I could be out of there before 10:10. Then the problem came when I was in the kitchen and I heard someone whisper the words, "Help me." It startled me and I jumped, looking around for the source of the cry for help. I saw no one around, but I heard it again, and then the third time. "Help me." I began looking around before realizing I was running behind. I looked at my phone and it was 10:10. My heart sank to my stomach when I looked down the hallway and saw Ben's parents for the first time in the light. They were grossly emaciated and pale, looking completely malnourished. They were essentially walking skeletons. I apologized for taking so long and said I'd be on my way, but they just stood there, blocking the way to the front door. I said I would take the back door, which was located in the kitchen, but when I went to open it, I found out it required a key to open from the inside. It was at this point that the true panic set in. I looked behind me and the parents were now about half a foot away from the entrance to the kitchen, and I had nowhere else to go except what I presume was a doorway to the pantry. They had blank stares across their faces and their eyes looked like their life had left a long time ago. In a last-ditch effort, I went to the door that I thought was a pantry, and it was instead met with a staircase leading to a basement, with, of course, no lights. As soon as I opened the door, there was a horrid stench that washed over the otherwise clean air I was standing in. I carefully went down the stairs and looked for a window, but they were all nailed shut. I happened to look back up the stairs, and the parents were standing next to each other on the top of the stairs. It was truly horrifying. I pulled out my phone and called 911, not knowing what else to do. And when I explained my situation, they said that they would send a car out immediately and to stay on the phone while they connected me to a unit en route. I ran into the dark basement using my phone light. I couldn't move too much illuminating since it was the middle of a call, but it was just enough. There were racks of junk lined in the basement, separating into almost aisles. I went down to check if there were any windows that were possibly loose. Then I turned around and shined the light in front of me, and inches away from my face were the parents' lifeless faces. I let out a scream and ran into the other direction and tripped over something, sending my phone flying from my hand. Of course, it landed face down, so I couldn't find it. I ran back upstairs into the kitchen, looking back and seeing their parents standing in the bottom of the stairs with slight grins on their faces. I ran down the hall to the front door and flung it open, screaming when I saw a cop standing right in front of me. He asked if I was the one that called as I pushed him past it to get outside, and I told him I was. I looked at the window and saw the parents were sitting in their chairs watching their game show. I explained that the crazy old people had trapped me in their house and were chasing me around. The cop went in to talk to the parents and look around while I sat in the cop car. He came back and about 5 minutes later asked if I was sure there was someone chasing me. I said yes, I was absolutely sure, and that it was those two old people that lived there. He informed me that the people that lived there, the people in the chairs, had been dead for quite some time. I asked what the smell in the basement was, and he said that there was another body down there. Backup showed up and they took my statement, and I explained how I'd been coming there for months feeding the cats. I told them to call Ben, the homeowner's son. I gave them the number and it was disconnected. I found a few days later that the body in the basement was Ben. What I don't get is who's been paying me this whole time. When I was 21, I transferred to a college in San Francisco. I checked out a room for rent on Craigslist. It was a really nice 2-bedroom apartment. It was cheap rent and close to the campus, so I was an ideal spot. The girl who lived there was a 29-year-old, and her name was Beth. She was tall and wide and had jet black hair and wore pale makeup. She seemed nice, although a little quiet, but seemed to like me, so she agreed to let me move in. So far, so good. My first night there, we went out for pizza, and that's when I could tell that something was a little bit off with her. Throughout dinner, she kept telling me how much I looked like Shia LaBeouf. I didn't know what to say and shrugged it off with a thanks. I mean, I looked nothing like Shia LaBeouf, so it didn't make any sense to me. When we got back home, she asked if I had seen her room yet. I said no, and she took me to see it. Her walls were covered with posters of Shia LaBeouf. She even had printed out photos with him all over her mirror. She owned all his movies. I didn't know what to make of it. It was creepy. The whole night she had been saying how much I looked like him, and now it's obvious to me that she had an obsession with the guy. A few weeks passed, and I never really saw that much of her. We didn't spend any time together really. She would come home and practically run to her room. She would spend the whole night in there. She had this creepy high-pitched giggle, and I would hear her giggling through the walls at night. I wondered what the hell she would be doing. Occasionally, she would come out and talk to me for like 2 minutes, and she would always be slurring her words, so I suspected she was drinking a lot. Sometimes she wouldn't say anything, and she would just stand in the hallway and watch me from the living room. I would turn and see her and be surprised and say, "Hello, Beth." And then there would be a long, awkward pause, and she would just give out a creepy, high-pitched giggle. It was uncomfortable being around her. She gave me the chills. One night, I woke up around 2 a.m. because I heard what sounded like the front door being unlocked. I came out of my bedroom, and all the lights were off, but I could still see Beth standing in front of the door. She had her face against it, and she was turning the lock back and forth over and over again. Every time she turned the bolt, she mumbled my name. Max Baker, Max Baker, Max Baker. Seeing her standing in the dark and mumbling my name really freaked me out, and it doesn't help that she kinda looks like a bigger version of the girl from The Ring. I just quietly went back into my room and tried to sleep. One night I was watching Gladiator and she stumbled out of her room and turned on the living room light on, forcing me to pause the movie, which was annoying. She then asked me if I wanted to hear about her ex-boyfriend. It was an uneasy segue to the topic, but I just said sure, and then awkwardly sat back to listen to her. 10 minutes into her story, she got so riled up she was screaming at the top of her lungs about their breakup, and I was worried that the neighbors were going to call the cops, and she wasn't listening to me when I was asking her to lower down the volume. Amidst all her screaming, one of the things she said really freaked me out. She was in such a fit and yelled, "I'll slit his fucking throat." That was a big game changer. Suddenly I had no idea what this girl was capable of. She was practically a stranger, and everything I had seen was becoming alarming and disturbing. After a few more minutes, she told me thanks for listening, and she started doing her giggle. I got out of there pretty fast and went to the room to go to sleep. I had a pretty unsettling feeling about being in the house with her, and what's worse is that the room that I was in had no lock. I pushed the edge of my dresser in front of it to act like a barricade. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of my dresser scraping against the floor. Beth was pushing the door open. I turned on the light and shouting for her to stop. I could see her through the opening of the door. She was so drunk and she had this insane look in her eyes. I pushed the door closed and yelled to her to go to bed. I could hear her walk to her room, but I couldn't fall back asleep. The next morning, when I went into the hallway, my heart dropped. I saw one of her steak knives on the floor by my door, and I got goosebumps all over my arm. All I could think about was her saying she would slit the guy's throat. I confronted her about it, and she said that she didn't remember pushing my door open, and she didn't even remember telling me about her ex. I had enough. My lease was month to month, and so I found a new spot and moved out. About a month after I moved, she contacted me. I was at the movies and my phone was off. When I got out and turned on my phone, and to my shock, I received 40 plus text messages that she had sent me over the past 2 hours. They were all insane texts about ranging from "Hi, how are you?" to "I fucking hate you." It was insane. I didn't respond and I never heard from her again. I always wondered if I hadn't put my dresser in front of my door, would she have quietly came into my room and slit my throat? It still freaks me out. It all started since I started using a website called Craigslist. I wanted to buy a new couch for my house, and a lot of my friends told me about this site. So I thought, why not use it to check out for deals on a new couch. There was a sale on a white couch which I really liked, and the price was very good. I'll call this couch seller Tom. I asked him about the couch, and he said it was in really good condition as shown in the picture, and that I could come over to his house to pick it up. The address he gave me led to a relatively small house near a forest path. He told me to come to his house around 6 p.m. So after a few days, I arranged with Tom to come pick up the couch. He said I could come, so I got in my car and drove to his house. The house is located a few miles outside of a small town. It's worth noting that the neighborhood in which the couch was located in wasn't known to be dangerous. After about a half an hour of driving, I arrived at the address. It was a small 2-story house. I knocked on the door, and after about half a minute of waiting, a man opened the door, I would say in his mid-40s. The man looked completely normal. He said to come in and he would show me the couch. When I went inside, the couch he showed me looked just like the one in the picture, and Tom also said he would help me put the couch in the trunk of my SUV. Nice guy, I thought. After we finished putting the couch in the trunk, I said goodbye to Tom, and so did he. I hopped in a car, and after about 15 minutes of driving home, when I got to a more urban area, I noticed that the vehicle behind me was behaving a little strange. After a few minutes, I realized he was following my every turn I made with my vehicle. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, or maybe we were just driving to 2 areas close to each other, so I didn't really pay much close attention. But after a few more minutes of intentionally making wrong turns, I realized that the vehicle was not actually leaving me. It was in fact following me all this time. Wrong turn after wrong turn. At this point, I was quite concerned. I started to drive at a higher speed, and at some point in the ride, with the vehicle still following me, I looked over the rearview mirror again. I noticed that the vehicle was a little closer to me now, and it can give me a better look inside the vehicle and who was driving it. I'm not sure what model it was, but it looked like an old red Toyota. The face was familiar, but I couldn't put a finger on it. After a minute of trying to crack why this man seemed so familiar to me, I understood why, and it struck me. The driver is Tom. He looks exactly like him. I no longer knew what to do at this point, so I called 911 and reported the vehicle following me, and I told him the area in which I was driving, while driving at a very high speed. Sometime later, I saw the vehicle was no longer behind me, and I guess it was because the driver realized I had already called the police. I parked my car in the parking lot of a nearby shopping center and reported my current location to the dispatcher, so that they can come to the location and I will give details about the man. Unfortunately, by the time I remembered to open the couch ad on Craigslist, it was already long since deleted by then. I'm stupid. I had to take a screenshot of the ad straight away when I saw that things were starting to get weird. The cops came up and I told them about the incident. They took details like the description of the man and my rough estimate of what I believe the car he drove looked like. They told me that they would try to find the man. I have not yet received any information from the police regarding the man. All this happened about a month and a half ago. But 2 weeks ago, I heard the trash can next to my house being kicked over and falling in the middle of the night. Then I heard the sound of glass breaking and a rock was thrown inside my bedroom window and shattered it. Then I heard someone running to a car and they began to floor it. I immediately called 911, but when they arrived, the person is long gone. I showed them the shattered bedroom window and they left. The man has not yet been found. Since the incident, I started installing security cameras in my house so that if something like this ever happens, I can have video proof. I'm not sure if this incident is related to the incident I had with Tom, but I believe that there's a connection. Last night I got a notification from my security system and it showed a man starting to walk up to my door and then stop when they noticed my new motion detector lights turned on, and he noticed my security system. He ran back to his car and got in an old red Toyota and floored it.